Yeah. Okay. So we kept prototyping, testing until we reached thing called the problem solution fit, which I'll tell you about in a while. And we move to the next slide, please. So what I've just explained is called the design thinking cycle. Uh, can someone move the slides, please? Okay. No, just next, not previous, please. Yeah, we're good. So this is the design thinking cycle. Sorry, can we have one back? Yeah. So this is the design thinking cycle. It starts with empathy. So here you're trying to empathetically understand the problem. You're not making assumptions about the users, the problem. And if you're making assumptions at this point, you have to be conscious that these are assumptions that you will either validate to be true or to be false or to be missing. And then after that, you start defining two things, the problem statement and the user persona. And the problem statement is a statement. It's not like, so if I say 93% of women globally experienced harassment, that's not enough of a statement. I need to say, and for example, they don't have access to something because of stigma, for example, or they don't feel something because of so and so. And so here you define the problem statement and the user persona, and then you start ideating by like brainstorming with your team unfiltered ideas, like no matter how stupid the ideas are, just say them out loud. And then out of 100 ideas, there could be one or two that make sense. And then so you start prototyping them. The important thing at this step is that you use minimal resources. So you don't burn so much time, you don't burn so much money, you don't burn so much energy in this part, because it's probably going to be revisited later on. And then you test it with the users, and you can reiterate, like the tests could make you revisit the problem statement or the personas, or it could actually make you visit the empathy, like you do it until you achieve, as I said, the problem solution fit. So the difference between the problem solution fit and the product market fit. Can we go next for one slide, please? Yeah. Okay, so I'll go quickly so that we have time for the questions. The problem is the problem solution fit focuses most on the user, the problem, and the solution. Yet product market fit takes into consideration other aspects like the competition, the pricing, if people are pay, the validation and stuff like that. Both are important. You usually jump to the problem solution and then go to the market fit. And then you're ready to start fundraising your project. But at this point, I'd love to know your questions, if you have any. Any questions? Or any questions that I haven't answered that you asked before?
Don't be shy, guys. I have a question, very specific technical one. So really interesting in the app that you could see a map with like lit spaces and stuff like that. How do you get data for that part?
It's from facilitating safe reporting. So we created a safe space for people to report incidents, and then we use these reporting to like generate heat maps. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a nice presentation, and congratulations for such a very nice innovation. Also here in Kenya, my name is Brenda. I'm also a young founder. We have a women's rights organization called My Body, My Body, and we partner with other like-minded actors who have also innovated using the new technology by having the helplines, the application. So my question comes in, who are the target group? Because we need to know the age who are authorized to use the application to report and also to use it. I know it depends with your countries, the age of people who are supposed to be on internet, and also on confidentiality or consent. How do you consent for one to use your application?
Thank you for this question. So for the age part, we have two targeted segments, or this is what we observed our users are from. One being women age maybe 18 until 35. This target segment just downloads the app, adds probably her friends, her parents, her spouse, and then goes on with it. And then there's another segment, which is parents, who actually want to make sure their children are safe regardless of gender. And so in this part, they do create the circle and start adding their kids. So we have two different age. And I think this specific thing depends on the market, depends on the country, on the region and stuff like that. So I wouldn't go on and generalize it for all markets. And for the you said consent, we handle this in the terms and conditions because it's an app. So we make this very clear in the terms and conditions. Most features are available to use for everyone except for therapy. You have to take your parents' consent if you're a kid or below a certain age. But and that's why we also have group therapy because it does not have an age limit or a parental consent mandate. Yeah. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Kelly from UNFPA Cameroon. Congratulations on the app, which is quite a useful one. My question goes in the same line with Sak's question in terms of generating the data. You spoke about AI and you said it's based on incidents, but you also made mention of incidents such as accidents or falls or things like that, which are things which may not reoccur. So I am quite curious on how such incidents appear on the map if you take into account the fact that it could be a one-time thing. Thank you.
Yeah, so these are two separate things. The SOS or the reporting system or the safety system, and the incident like reporting tool. So the incident reporting is just people trying to contribute to the better of the community and trying to log data to help others stay safe. But the SOS part is that someone has their phone in their pockets with a certain mode enabled, and then the phone detected that this person is in danger. So it just notifies their chosen circle of trust, which they have pre-put. We never share such SOS on the map because you have to post it yourself for you to consent to have this data available to the public. So they're actually two different features. Is this clear? Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So now I would like to understand if the person has that in their pocket. Let's give a scenario. You get into a street and then you realize there are two persons who have been following you, but you don't want to take out your phone. So how does it get to detect that you need help? And also I would like to know what are the type of incidents that people have been reporting, so I get an idea of what data you expect to find on the app.
So for the following scenario, we actually have different ways for SOS. We have manual SOS where you open the app and click on a button. We have SOS where your phone is in your pocket and you click multiple clicks on your volume and power button together. So the SOS is activated because in this case, you don't want to speak and make people know that you are SOS. And there's another SOS method, which is voice triggered SOS or voice triggered call out, where you have a specific word preset on the app, like oranges, apples, whatever. And then when the app hears this word in this mode, the SOS is activated. And we made sure to handle different use cases because each way could be handy in different situations. And this is why empathy is important. For what was your second question? Was it? Yeah, the kind of reports. Yeah, so it's anything that affects public safety. It's not gender specific. So any potential, it could be catcalling, like someone is following you, theft, stuff like that. So any public safety hazard. But to mention examples, it's inappropriate comments, inappropriate gazes, theft, public theft, and more extreme cases.
So just in interest of time, I'm going to stop the Q&A here. Thank you so much. One last question for you is what's next for Hear You? If you could just 30 seconds.
Yeah, so what's next for Hear You? We're actually now getting into the B2B sector. So we're like studying that and considering having, since we have the know-how of safe reporting tools and SOS, so we're trying to bring that to the B2B by creating a decentralized reporting system, because there's power dynamics in the workplace, and sometimes the person the victim is reporting to could be the harasser. So that's why it's important to be decentralized in a sense. And it's mostly handy in situations like call centers, factories, where there are lots of female employees at night, where the upper management is not there as well. So this is our next step.
Amazing. Congratulations again, and thank you so much. Yeah, big round of applause. After the session, please catch Salma if you want her contact details or links to the website and so on. Okay, we are moving on to the panel section of the session. So I'm super, super pleased. I'm just opening my notes here so I don't say anything wrong, to introduce to you the panel of today. So I'm going to start by introducing Paris Vakesho. Very, very pleased to have you. Paris is the Director of Strategy and Network Association at the Ashoka Network. And you're based in Nairobi. Yes, welcome. And then we have Jason Anjichi. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, and I'm sorry if I'm not. Business Development Lead from Somo Africa. Very, very welcome and super excited to have you. And we have Beth also in the room, founder of the Ahadi Pads startup, which she will speak more about. I'm getting confused because I put 4 chairs up, but actually only 3 live. So the final panel member, super excited that you could join us, is Lisa Lenhoutz-Martin, who is online. You see her on the screen. Lisa is the CEO and founder of the Forward Group, which is a business strategy advisory firm, if I'm getting that right. But Lisa, I will let you introduce your work in a second. Welcome, everyone. So, I'm going to start the panel debate, and also keeping in mind the fantastic presentation from Salma, which is a real true story of, how do you go from sitting at a coffee shop with a printout of a question and just taking ideas to actually having a proper business and getting people to finance that. And at this point, you're traveling around the world. You were in the US just recently, so I think that's super inspiring. So in light of that, I would like to start by asking you, Paris, also thinking about not just Salma's journey, but the youth entrepreneurs that are in the room today or might be joining us online. Can you introduce what an organization such as Ashoka does? How can you support youth entrepreneurs and youth innovation?
Thank you, Zacharias. As already introduced, I work for an organization called Ashoka. And maybe to understand what Ashoka does to support young people who we call change makers and social entrepreneurs, it will be important to know who's Ashoka. So basically, Ashoka is the world's largest association of people we call social entrepreneurs, and is credited for having built the field of social entrepreneurship globally. So who are social entrepreneurs? They're basically people with systems changing solutions that are transforming sectors. They're creating new norms for society. So how then do we support scale? So scale operates at 2 levels. One, and it really depends on the level of impact that someone is. But ultimately, what is important is that we remember that when we are talking about scaling of social impact, we are talking about scaling insights. So not necessarily you have to set shop. If your organization is in Kenya, you have to open another similar in Uganda. It could be that then your insights, because they're transformative, are what people learn and then take them into their own context and design solutions using them. to be able to scale. So what does Ashoka do? So what we do, one, based on the level, so there are 4 levels we see of impact. One is direct. So you have people that are on a day-to-day basis interacting with the people they serve. So it's directly. You need food, we get you. You need pads, we get you pads. So at that level, then the type of scaling is also different. They might just decide, then I need to, one, go beyond just giving the food to figure out why are these people hungry. So then we support them with tools that help them to think through how, then what are the root causes of those issues, and how do you design for systems change. And then for people that now have moved to the next level of, yes, we're giving food, but then we can't keep coming here. And so then the next level of support is, how do we train? And we see this a lot in peer education programming, where then you train trainers of trainers that then continue to be able to give work. So you have an indirect reach. So that is one way of scaling. And also when you're there, you begin to think about, so what next? Because if we are doing it, we just, as an organization, maybe you've trained 30 people that have trained 100. So how do you ensure that you've addressed the issue holistically, starting with your own small constituency, but also for the whole country? Like now we're talking about female genital mutilation. So then that means you need to think about, how do we move to the next level of systems change, which is the 3rd level we see. And those are the people that, as Ashoka, we call them social entrepreneurs or Ashoka fellows. And so then the system, the social entrepreneurs then are looking at what are the root causes and what is it that we can do that potentially changes how things are done in that sector and ensures that solution outrun problems. So they begin to look at what are the key systemic issues that need to be addressed so that then we can see the change. And then, so Ashoka then works with them. We have 2 key ways of working with that level of social entrepreneurs. And most of the time it's skills, giving them skills and tools so that then they can be able to get to that level. So in skills and tools, we have a process we call Globalizer that really helps them. Once they've figured out and designed for that market, then we help them to really think through, how do you take your insights to the next level? And then we have also where there are issues, there are gaps, and there are solutions we know outside there that can work. Then we have a process that helps to bridge that gap. So finding people that your mission vision aligned, that you can work with to be able to scale that. What people call sometimes social franchising, or it can take different formats. And last but not least, so that I pass to the next, where Ashoka also comes in as a network of change makers and social entrepreneurs, we build movements. So we build ecosystems because we know for a solution to really transform a sector or a field, it needs to become a norm. When you design a new norm for society, then you've been able to shift perceptions and practices. And so then, and that is the only way. Business people will tell you that for an idea to take root, it has to reach 16% of the market. The 16% of the market, we call them laggards in our social impact terms. And so then when we build an ecosystem of players and partners, then we bring everyone together and they're able to look at, so what exists, where are the gaps, and most important, then who else do we need to bring on board to be able to create that shift in society, so that then no child should actually go to school with a fear of getting married because they've been cut or because they will be cut. So that is the other level where we build networks.
Thank you so much. Super interesting. I really like this notion of, scaling insights. It's very, very important. We gathered here from the Arab States region, the East and Southern Africa region, and also West and Central, so all of Africa essentially. And we all have different national jurisdictions, different technological environments in these countries. So let's not make that stop us from exchanging ideas and understanding what insights might work across. Trying to go even more concretely, I would like to ask you, Jason. That was not the question. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna let the sound guy figure it out. Yeah, I continue. So from your professional experience of supporting small and micro businesses, what are some of the most common barriers to accessing finance, or taking it from an idea to to a business? And what are some of the ways that you and Somo Africa or similar organizations can help and support?
Thank you very much. So, habari zenu. Hi. Yeah, my name is Jason, and I work for Somo Africa as the business development lead. And Somo works with entrepreneurs coming from low resource communities to enable them to build scalable businesses. And to your question on the barriers that entrepreneurs face, the first barrier, which is common across Africa, is access to finance. According to a report by the Africa Development Bank, there's a $42 billion financing gap when it comes to women SMEs. And how Somo tries to ensure that entrepreneurs are able to access this information is we have a model, and the model starts with providing digital tools to would-be entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. So these digital tools were created by our team, and they feature local case studies of entrepreneurs who are making impact in their communities. Once these entrepreneurs interact with this content on WhatsApp and also on voice, on a voice platform, they're able to see what track they want, whether they want to be a social business or whether they want to be a brick and mortar business. These digital tools enables us to scale and reach more people, because a lot of youth are suffering because there are not very many credits. There are not very many ways of lending, providing financing to entrepreneurs. So Somo came up with an alternative credit system. And how this would happen is once the entrepreneurs have gone through the digital tools, they enter into our Somo Academy. Now, our Somo Academy is a business incubator. We mostly work with social enterprises. We make sure that even as they're going to make a profit, their businesses support the people around the community that they're in, and they also have an impact on the planet, a positive impact on the planet. So when they enter into Somo Academy, we have 2 tracks. The first track is more of socially focused businesses and green businesses, just to build social entrepreneurs. The second bit is more for the brick and mortar businesses. This would be your local grocery store or your local barber shop, or even motorists who drive the borders that's what they're commonly known around Kenya. So we would teach them business skills and help them formalize. Once they have formalized in the Somo Academy, they'll get a chance to present their business ideas with the support of mentors through the program, which also ties into the problem, because we realize that a lot of organizations that are supporting entrepreneurs do not have a holistic package. Either they would be providing funding or they would be providing training. So at Somo, we have a needs-based program whereby we look at the entrepreneur and the community that they're coming in. We help them design a solution that is scalable and also is able to create impact in their community. Once they've learned this in the Somo Academy, they'll get a chance to present to judges. And if their businesses are deemed successful, they now enter into our acceleration program. In the acceleration program, entrepreneurs are able to get access to business development services as well as different types of financing. So we have grants and we also have convertible equity, meaning that when we provide support to the entrepreneurs, if they were to become a limited company, we would get some shares in the company. And this is to ensure that there's continuity and there's also sustainability. Other than that, we have very friendly loans. Our loans go to a maximum of 5% per annum. This is to ensure that entrepreneurs have patient capital enough to enable them to, as they're making mistakes, as they learn from the job, they're able to grow. So this is the acceleration bit. Other than that, once the entrepreneurs have been empowered and they're able to produce a minimum viable product, they'll start selling. We'll help them in the market access just to ensure that they know where they can sell their products. They know the different types of regulations that are in the market. And in this aspect, we just ensure that entrepreneurs have agency. We don't necessarily go and sell the products for them. We just let them know where the markets are and what is required. And in the case where we are able to negotiate with institutions and stakeholders to ensure that these social entrepreneurs get a platform, that's where we step in. Once the entrepreneurs have grown and they've received funding, they now get into a platform called the SOMO community. And the SOMO community is an opportunity for social entrepreneurs to come and share ideas, to network, and to also be able to talk about the challenges, because right now there are so many different challenges that are affecting young entrepreneurs and also women entrepreneurs. So SOMO comes in to ensure that when they're in this SOMO community, they're able to even grow together. We have advisory services. Hello. Okay, thank you. No. Yes, sir. So we have advisory services. So the SOMO community has been really instrumental in ensuring that entrepreneurs don't feel alone in this world, because sometimes it can be challenging. And from there, we also try to look for other partners who can help them scale. So in essence, those are some of the challenges that youth face. And that is how SOMO is trying to ensure that entrepreneurs get an equal footing.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I think that's super interesting to hear also for some of the people in the room. And Jason, do stay around afterwards, because I'm sure there's lots of people who would like to connect. Now, I would like to ask you, Lisa. I'm looking, you can see my neck here because I'm trying to look at you, but so I'll look into the camera. That's better.
Great.
So knowing that you and your organization works maybe at a little bit of a later stage in kind of like business development, I want to hear your perspective, and maybe if you can briefly introduce yourself and your background and your work and your organization. And the question is, when you're starting a business, even if that's the micro level, what are some things to keep in mind if you want to ensure that you have this sustainability further down the road at the time when you will be taking it to scale? So that's the question.
Great. Thank you, Zacharias. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you everyone for attending the panel today. I hope everyone's doing well. Just to make sure, can you all hear me okay?
We hear you perfectly, thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Great, so I'm Lisa Lienhoutz-Martin. I'm the CEO of the Forward Group, which is a strategic growth advisory firm specializing in strategy and fundraising in the areas of global health and development, innovation, and social impact. And really taking a public-private lens to all the work that we do. My background is with global development agencies and funding agencies such as the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, Gavi, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. And then more recently, as I got increasingly passionate about impact and the potential of innovation to drive impact, I also partnered with the Gates Foundation and the Ministry of Health of Kenya to pilot blockchain in the vaccine supply chain. Then that led me into the creation of the Forward Group, where I can help clients bring their ideas to scale to create optimal impact. And so I'm really pleased to be here today. I really love the topic and the importance of social innovation as an accelerator to create solutions for the challenges we face. And I'm happy to be able to speak with you about that today. Zacharias, to answer your question, I think it is really important to think about the sustainability, the business sustainability, the continuity of what's created in any innovation in order to get the maximum impact over time. For me, it's about leveraging our initial investments, ideas, and passion, and making sure that they last well into the future. I think this is something that's increasingly important in the global landscape, and I think that's something that is also feasible and important to all stakeholders. So whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a funder, whether you're a client or recipient of the service, and this is going to be something that we can really harness to drive the impact we're looking for and to create the social change that we're all motivated to achieve. I want to talk a little bit about how. I think people mention the word of scale up, growth, business sustainability, but I want to unpack that a little bit and make it practical. For me, it's about, and talk about the how. So for me, it's about three main things. Firstly, it's about having a scale up vision. You have to really start with the horizon in mind of where do you want to go? What does success look like for you? What's the desired impact? Who are the beneficiaries? And who will benefit from the value creation? Define the specific value of whatever asset you're creating or whatever service, and also the target market. Be very clear of the value of what it will do and who it will create value for. And then thirdly, within that, define the aspiration. What's the scale? Where do you want to get to? 3 years, 5 years, even beyond? Be as specific as you can. So that's firstly, that's the scale up vision. Once you look internally on the scale up vision, you also want to look externally around you at the landscape. Okay, so thinking about the best pathway to growth, considering your external factors. This is going to be, I think about this in four key ways. So drivers, opportunities, challenges, and capabilities. For drivers, what are independent forces that can help push the scaling up forward? It might have nothing to do with you, but you can ride this wave. What is that? It could be good, it could be bad, but these are big forces to be aware of and work with rather than be taken by surprise by the market. Thinking about opportunities that you can leverage, number two. If this could help the asset go to scale faster. On the flip side of that, you want to think about challenges. Identify circumstances that, if left unmanaged, could pose a threat to the asset scale. And then fourthly, in a really practical way, just thinking about your capabilities. So you have your vision, you have your landscape, within the landscape, thinking about what's needed in order to take the asset to scale. Now, that may be a capability that you have internally, but it may be one that you lack, or you may need to find externally through partnership or so on. So that's the landscape scan. So scale up vision, landscape scan, and then finally culminating all this into a scale up pathway. This is really a way to make sure that you have a specific trajectory towards growth and scale up. You want to think about ownership within this. What level of ownership is required to achieve the aspiration and impact? What's your vehicle? What's your structure? Is it something that's a business? Is it a social business? Is it a joint venture? Is it a consortia? Is it a partnership? Is it an NGO? Is it a foundation? So really understanding who will own this asset and the best way to take it forward. And the structure there. So, and thinking about within the structure, the funding model to achieve that and impact. So, how you want to raise funding, if that's going to be through VC or private capital, if that's going to be what we call non-dilutive funding through grants, and if that's going to be through a revenue stream, products and services, and thinking about the optimal mix of that to get where you want to go. And it might be different at different phases of growth. So thinking about that as well. Underlining all this on the pathway is mechanism. So what strategies and capabilities would you need to take this to scale, by whom? So being really clear on the specific things you need and who will do that. So I think if you look at those three things, it demystifies a bit this concept of scale. And I think the other thing I'll say with all this is that it's not a science. I'd say it's a mix of science and art. So it's something where you want to stay flexible, stay dynamic. This is going to be something that, you'll start out with the end in mind, but you'll constantly be revisiting as you have new information, as you iterate your product or service, as new things happen in your external environment. So I would stay dynamic with that. But I think that overall, if we do these three things, if we think about the broader picture, it can really guide us to this long-term impact that we all desire to achieve. And then really make sure that we can capture the value that we've created. And so you can see the impact that we're all working so hard for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's super, super interesting to hear. I love the part of a mix of science and art, that's for sure. Salma, I hope you're taking notes. Great. So now we want to hear from the final panelist, Beth, who has created her own business. So now we've heard from three different people here who support businesses to make them grow. So a side question is it true what they're saying? How have they helped? In your case, would be good. And then, please tell us about your business, your journey, and specifically, the challenges you faced and how you overcame them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think it's a pleasure to be in this place. As you've heard, my true name is Abed Sheba Otuga. I'm the founding director of Ahadi Reusable Pads. I started this business because it was something that had been in my heart for a long time. When I was a girl, I couldn't be able to attend school, and I almost dropped out when I found that I'd messed up and I didn't have sufficient pads. So when I ran out of class, out of the reading room, I found that my grades were going low. I had an ambition to become a teacher. And so I had to go back. I just pulled myself and went back, and I was able to qualify. Professionally, I'm a teacher. So teaching. I was in a boys' school mainly. I don't know why I gravitated towards boys, but when towards my last time in teaching, I'm retired. I was in a primary school where there were both boys and girls. So I realized that this is a big problem. Menstruation is an issue, and accessing pads is a big problem. So I myself, again, in menopause, I could not contain my periods. And so I tried many different rugs, t-shirts, towels. When I ran out of that, I was thinking, now what next? Why don't I stitch something? Because I have stitching skills that can be more sustainable. And that's how I experimented with that. When I was out of work, I was wondering, now what business am I going to do? Luckily for me, I found Somo, and they recruited me. There were many people like filling this room, but I emerged one of the people who were taken in for the training. That training is the incubator. The incubator was 12 weeks. In 12 weeks, I was able to set up a business. I found out who are going to be my likely customers. I got a prototype. I did my business plan and many things. So here I am. I started. Immediately I started in 2018. 2019, I opened my doors. I sold 10,000. I sold for 10,000 shillings. But voila, Corona came. But I still managed to navigate through the help of Somo. And by just being at it, I was able to get through. Right now, I'm not a startup. I'm a growing business. And a growing business has its challenges. One of the major challenges is funding for scale up. I want to reach certain markets. How do I reach those markets? Number one, because I don't have a standardized, this is my innovation. For it to become acceptable, there are many things that I need to do. Yes, I'm reaching out. Yes, I've begun gaining traction. I'm selling. I'm even selling to organization. I'm getting some partners, but it is not enough. Why? I have not met the Kenya Bureau of Standardization, which will open for me channels, will make me more credible. People will believe that what I'm saying is true. And so that is one of the challenges that I've had in this journey. I met an officer from the Kenya Bureau of Standard. It is expensive to standardize. They have a set pattern of which if I did standardize, I would lose my innovation. I have an innovation. I have my product is working and people are using it. So why lose my innovation and become just like any other pad making? And yet, more than that, we're just not making pads. We're changing lives, like I've had here. If you give one girl a pad, she'll be able to go through school. Going through school, she'll become like me. If I didn't finish, I would not be here speaking. So she can be able to change the society around her like I'm doing. I go to schools, we talk. I go to societies, I talk to leaders who influence, and I still try to penetrate the regions where these pads are needed most. So when I go out there, I need support. I need the finances. I need people to join in, because I've heard there are many organizations. I've heard now about Ashoka, Somo is here with us, and others who can partner with us to change a life and change a nation. So those are some of the challenges that I have had up to this point. But I've managed through grit to come through. I learned about grit when I was at the Somo training. Grit is keeping at it, focusing, and trying to circumvent the difficulties that are along the way. Yes.
we're running out of time. Super interesting. I do want to just spend 5 minutes on Q&A, so that's why I'm taking. But Beth, fantastic to hear, and I think one of the takeaways from what you just said is again connecting with Paris on scaling insights. So I mean, one of the things your business has really done is you're not selling pads, you're actually selling access to education, you're selling access to life. So, and this is something that you can tell a really, yes, exactly, a really strong story that you can use when you're talking to partners, whether it's government or businesses, which I think is fantastic. Time for Q&A. We're running out of time. We have 5 minutes. First question is Salma. You're already raising your hand.
Thank you so much. I really love what you do and your vision. I'm just trying to understand the problem more. What makes, because it's geographic. So what makes pads inaccessible? Is it expensive, or is it sold in specific places? Or like, can people who cannot afford pads, they can afford food or not? Like, I'm just trying to understand the problem exactly.
We start with I'm going to take a few questions. We'll remember this one. The first question is the problem of the problem of accessibility pads.
Thank you. To Ashoka representative, I'm sorry I didn't hear your name, but is it Wange? Wakesho. Thank you very much. I've heard of you, but I've not been able to reach out to you maybe in person, but I've reached out through your website that are there, and there's no one who answers questions. So my my concern is, do you support young women-led organization? Because there have always been that notion of we don't have system in place and we are the system ourselves. Young people, we really love reading. And if you ask us to put things in order, we can put it in 20 minutes. So what are you doing in Kenya with young women's rights organization? My organization being one of them, and that we have sent a lot of requests for you to support us, and there's no response. How can you help us to reach you?
Thank you for that question. We'll take a third one. No one. I don't know who raised their hand first, but we'll take 4 questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Zola Kenzibandli. I'm from Eswatini. I would like to direct my question to Ahadi. I'm wondering if you, while starting up your business, maybe did you find any maybe restrictions like the acceptability of the pets, the reusable pets in Kenya? So as it is maybe the issue with maybe part of the Southern Africa countries like Eswatini, where the government does not accept the use. So will you, if you face those challenges, will you be able to share some tips on how to lobby government to accept the use of the pets? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take it, the 4th question here.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Shaima Ali, and I am from UNFPA GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council in Oman. So my question for the esteemed first 2 panelists about how you can ensure the sustainability of the funding you are giving, because the problem sometimes with the startups, the start is good, and then when there is no sustainability plan, when there is no, like I would say, a robust feasibility study at start, then we find them like a lot going into bankruptcy, which we don't want to see among youth, because it's quite like decreasing the motivation at the first place, and then makes them maybe less hopeless about having a startups. So what do you do exactly in order to ensure sustainability and sustainable coaching and the support along the way if it's startup till the growth stages? So thank you. Over.
Thank you so much. Another great question. We will start with Beth. Beth, you got 2 questions. Please keep it brief because we have 2 minutes. So the first question was from Salma on what is the actual challenge of accessibility to pads, if you can speak to that. And then the second question was your experience with restrictions related to your product or service in Kenya or Africa.
Okay, for the first question, pads are expensive, and pads poverty is a worldwide issue. So we find that pads poverty is there because of the general poverty, and especially to the less endowed in marginalized communities and in poor urban. So they cannot access pads. They hardly even get enough to eat. And like in Kenya, there is escalating costs. It's really becoming hard to feed. So I hope that answers your question. Number two, restrictions. Kenya does not restrict us using reusable pads, but the restriction will come about because I'm not able to access markets like supermarkets. Because the supermarkets, if you want to sell in the supermarkets, then you must have a standard, which is the government agency called Kenya Bureau of Standards. So I've been to that standard. I've been to Kenya Bureau. They said, madam, you can continue selling, but I won't sell to the regular shops, but to organizations, to people, to individuals, to groups, NGOs, and organizations like so who help us connect with buyers. So the other one about the government, you can talk to your government about the expected outcomes of having pads and not having pads. Because the reusable pads in the long run will be cheaper and sustainable, not only in one way. When you're using reusable pads, you are creating employment, you are sustaining the environment, you're keeping girls in school, and you're educating a nation through a girl and a mother. And finally, you're cleaning up the menstrual waste. So if you can lobby your government in this, join up with eco-friendly organization, then they can make noise about it. Maybe the government will change its mind. Thank you.
So much for those answers. Terrific. Paris? Okay, sure. You got the questions? So on support for women specifically. And then there's a second question which can go to Jason as well, but specifically on how to sustain financing.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for your question and for the feedback. So do we support young women-led organizations? Yes. What I would like all of you to know and to take from here is Ashoka has different engagements. So for people that are operating at direct and indirect level are what we call change makers. So we have programs for young people that are change makers. We have competition and different programs. And so, yes, so as long as you're creating social impact, yes, Ashoka is a home for you. You can find your space. For people that are looking at systems change, there's also another different track of engagement for them. And so those are the people that, one, we connect them with one another also, because sometimes he said it, entrepreneurs or people that are innovating are very lonely. You feel like you're trying to go against a system that is also coming back at you. And so having a team that you can work with, people that understand, believe, and work with you. So we do that. And so, yes, in short, yes, we support that. We have competitions. On the issue of not getting back, that has not been our strength, but it's something we are working on now in terms of feedback for people that did not meet the criteria. So if you go to the Ashoka website, you see a criteria for who's a young change maker and who's a social entrepreneur. So if you meet that criteria, then we are able to work with you. But right now, what we are doing, and that is the role that I'm actually playing right now for Africa, is we are getting back into our database and our systems and are hosting information sessions to help people understand what are the opportunities, how can we engage with Ashoka, because now we are really focused on how do we build a movement of people that are creating change. So helping everyone find their space. Before you had to just fit either you're a social entrepreneur or you're a change maker. If you're not, then we were not really engaging with that other cohort, but now that's happening. And so I'll give you my email. That is what I'm doing. I'd invite you to the next session that we have. On funding and sustainability. So one, Ashoka does not fund programs or projects. What we do are two key things. For young people that go through the various challenges, competitions, we have a whole process of helping them to grow to the next level and also to find funding or support. For the social entrepreneurs, they could be young or old. That's why I'm not saying young. So for the social entrepreneurs, then there are two key things in the criteria and in the process that help us to ensure sustainability. So Ashoka is really about the person, and because we believe that you get the right person, you will see change happen. and it is lifelong. So one of the criteria we look for is entrepreneurship. So your entrepreneurial journey, have you been someone who's always been creating change? Are you driven to do that? Today morning, the keynote speaker say that some people are facing challenges because there isn't money in female genital mutilation, then they're moving to climate change. It means that is not their passion, it's not their burden. So we look for people that are there and doing it because they want to create change, not because there is money and grants. So that is one sustainability angle that we look at. The second one is sometimes when you find social entrepreneurs, they're struggling between, I have this solution, it can actually transform society and how things are done, but my bills have to be paid. So what Ashoka does is put them on like a salary for a maximum of 3 years. And the whole idea is when we put you on a salary, it means your bills are paid. So then you can focus 100% on your idea and grow your impact. So that is what we do. Thank you.
Doubts. So please, I will make sure that everyone has access to your contact information on the panel. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, always with these sessions, we get so many questions. So that's it. Thank you so much again for coming, for spending the time, and please enjoy the rest of the summit conference. What is this? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth. Amazing. And then just to note, we're going straight into the next session. There's no tea break because we're late. So that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Like they say, we have a passion. Had I not been
I'm Robbie. Robert. Okay, so yeah, I think we're good to get started. Thank you everyone for sticking around, and thank you to the last session as well. It was very, very interesting. So kicking off this next session on innovative financing, what to do and how. Here we will highlight private sector engagement. So we have around an hour, maybe a little bit less, but we'll try to use the hour we have. The run of show will be an introduction, followed by a first presentation by Arif Neki, UN Strategic Partnership at the Resident Coordinator's Office and National Coordinator of the SDG Partnership Platform. That will be followed by a second presentation by Dr. Munir Ezzedine, and the third presentation then will be Teresa from the Global Innovation Fund. We will then open up an interactive session where you, the audience, can ask questions. Yeah, just open up the conversation for a discussion. And then finally, we will close up and go for lunch. So introduction. This session in particular will focus on exploring the concept of innovative financing. These guys are experts in innovative financing. We'll look at ways in which we can improve the efficiency of instruments and mechanisms already in use, or open a new way of attracting non-traditional financing mechanisms from private sector. The discussion will focus on various financing innovations and techniques through private and public partnerships, namely results-based financing, example, a development impact bond. We also will speak about catalytic funding, matching funds, debt swap, cause-related marketing, gender lens investing that can be adopted. So I will also welcome and thank our guests for being here. So we have Arif Neki, UN Strategic Partnerships at the Resident Coordinator's Office and founding coordinator of the SDG Partnership Platform. We have Dr. Munir Ezzedine from the UN Capital Development Fund, and also Teresa Bossambari from the Global Innovation Fund. So thank you guys for being here. We will kick off the first activity with Arif Neki. So Arif will speak about what has been UN Kenya's experience through unique multi-stakeholder partnerships through the SDG Partnership Platform to engage with private sector and philanthropy to drive profit with purpose. So welcome to the floor, Arif, and we have a short presentation as well, which Arif will present to. Sure. I think, do we only have one microphone that we will share? Okay, just one microphone. Okay.
Well, thank you all. Good afternoon. Good to see you. I think we're in a very sensitive position because we stand between you and lunch. So we're going to make sure we try and make this interesting. Delighted to be here. I'm going to just run through a quick presentation. But before I do that, Can I just see by a show of hands, how many of you are from the private sector, for profit? None. One? One. How many of you are from the private sector but non-profit? NGOs, CBOs, etc., etc. And how many of you are from development partners, donors, multilaterals, bilaterals? Just to get a sense of who we have in the room. Okay, super, thanks. So just I'm going to, who's controlling the slides? So I'm going to run fairly quickly. So if we can go to the next slide. Just give you an example of the journey we took in Kenya on trying to create a multi-stakeholder platform to bring in all of the above: development partners, private sector, philanthropy, civil society, research institutions, financiers. How do you create this ecosystem? So we had a Kenyan experiment to try and do this. And our role really at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, which coordinates all the 24 funds, agencies, and programs in Kenya, including 2 global head offices, which you know are present in Nairobi, UNEP and UN Habitat, also requires a fair amount of coordination to make sure we also deliver as one. So our role has been really what I call convening, connecting, and catalyzing. We don't implement, we don't invest, but we convene, we connect, and we try and catalyze these partnerships. Next slide. Why do we need to do what we need to do? So the rationale behind this was that we've had in Kenya, like most African countries, this luxury and dependence on grants and grant funding, particularly from bilaterals and multilaterals. Even the foundations that we work with, and I founded East Africa Philanthropy Network 20 years ago with 300 foundations, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, through the Aga Khan Foundation. We found that almost 70–80% of the sector and foundations, as we call them in inverted comments in Kenya, which are actually not foundations, but they are NGOs, companies limited by guarantee, trusts, societies, or associations. We're trying to create a foundations law now. We're mostly dependent on bilateral grants. So you had the wholesalers of grants and the retailers of grants, but everything came through from the grant funding. And my joke with most people was to say, okay, guys, how's it going? And they said, oh, brilliant. And I'm driving this 4x4 Pajero and life is good. And I said, so how are you funding yourself? Oh, I've got this great, bilateral grant from this particular bilateral in Upper Hill or Gigiri. And life is good. And I said, yes, but what happens when the grant expires? And the answer is usually, well, we'll write another proposal. And that's the issue, that Kenya and many other African countries are now moving to middle income status. And that means that we are less grant worthy. And that means that those sweetheart grants will disappear. ODA shrinks. And we need to move, as the Secretary General says, from funding to financing. And it's not easy because we have not been used to doing this for the last 5 decades, particularly in the non-profit sector. So how do we do this? And how do we retain grants where we can get them, but how do we create other opportunities to leverage financing, to pool financing, to create instruments that will attract private capital as well? So that's really why we are trying to do what we try to do in Kenya. And it's an experiment that is now caught on, and we have multiple African countries we're helping to try and replicate this platform. Next slide. These are just an example of what I call the ingredients in the mix to cook this lasagna called SDG financing. You need private sector, you need philanthropy, you need impact investors, you need bilaterals, you need civil society. So really, how do you bring all these partners together? And these are the kinds of partners we work with. There are many others too. Next slide. So what we did was we launched as an SDG philanthropy platform in 2014 and brought all the foundations together to try and bridge the gap, the $2 trillion gap in financing that was required, that came out of the Addis Summit to implement the SDGs. We found that private capital was important, agile, but not enough. What we had with philanthropy was very exciting innovations that could be used as seed financing to then unlock private capital, and then in turn unlock government co-financing in the life cycle of an investment. Because we always talk about this disease in Kenya called pilotitis, one pilot after another pilot. And some of us, Wazés, for 40 years, have seen one pilot reinvented 20 years later into a new pilot. And really, pilots do nothing because they don't change the big picture in Kenya. We had 5, 6, 7% GDP growth rate, but it masks 40 to 50% of poverty. We really need scale and systems change that goes beyond short-term political cycles. Every time a government changes or a governor changes, the projects have to restart. We don't need that. And the other thing we don't need is going beyond these fiscal cycles. Either it's a grant cycle or it's a donor, a corporate donor that has given you a deadline and after which, you're going to start over again. So how do you sustain some of this work? And that's why some of these financing opportunities are important for us to think about. Two very exciting opportunities that are happening. One opportunity is that there's a much more, and I don't know if you people are finding it, openness to multi-stakeholder partnerships. In the past, there was a lot of silos. And what we're saying is, let's break let's drop our egos, logos, and silos and converge for impact. So let's give credit to everyone, but let's make sure we converge. So you don't want branding to stand in the way of convergence. So what we did was develop 4 key work streams around this, and we launched this platform at the UN General Assembly in the Kenya speech to say that every conference has nice pledges of partnerships under SDG 17, but then, as soon as the conference is over, oftentimes things dry up and the partnerships don't happen. So it becomes very ad hoc. What the Kenya government announced was that we need a concrete ecosystem on the ground to make these partnerships work. So here's the African cooking pot. We put ingredients in and then we cook this lasagna. We make sure that we bring these partners together on the ground. These work streams are really around ecosystem building, market development, innovative financing, curating concrete pipelines. So we move from the big talk to concrete action and impact on the ground. Scaling innovations. Innovations is a very sexy, exciting topic, but you have hundreds of accelerators, incubators, hubs, etc. Are they changing the picture in Kenya? Are they reaching those 40% of people below the poverty line? So really the question is, are we scaling up proven innovations beyond a certain point? And that's where I think additional ecosystem support is required and financing is required. And finally, policy advocacy. Do you want to spend your time running after $100,000 pilot and spend 2 weeks chasing that? Or are you better sitting with the SDG caucus of the parliament and changing the act to change the whole operating environment in Kenya around a specific issue? So policy advocacy, of course, is important. Coming together, we can amplify this kind of work. So just running very quickly through some of the work streams. Next slide. Next slide. Go the other way, forward. This is gone backwards. Forwards. Forwards, yeah, one more, yeah. So the idea is if thinking about SDG financing, then we need to work across the whole range of financing, everything from grant money. And I'm not saying don't take grant money, make hay while the sun shines, but use it to create investments that create an income flow that allow you to sustain what you do when the grants run out, all the way up to commercial financing. So you can have venture philanthropy, you can have impact funds, etc., etc. Next slide. I'll skip this successes and bits. This is just to promote the platform, telling you that we did $200 million of investments in primary healthcare, etc., etc. Next slide. So ecosystem building, what does this mean? This means that how do you bring, let's say, development partners to have and those of you from the UN, I think might find this interesting because we talk about it a lot. We talk about private sector engagement. And when I joined the private sector, I mean the UN from private sector and philanthropy, my question was like, what does private sector engagement mean to you? I got an interesting range of answers. And some of the older career diplomats in the multilateral world were like, yeah, let's bring them over for lunch. And then, between main course and dessert, we'll ask them to open up their checks and write a check. That's not private sector engagement. That's transactional. That's just CSR, small, 2% budget on the side. What you want to go after is really a deep co-creation of initiatives with private sector. And that's what private sector appreciates as well. So how do we co-create? And what we try to do is, besides bringing a number of bilaterals, multilaterals, private sector and partners onto a multi-partner trust fund we created in New York, which is still running, we created the National Advisory Board for Impact Finance. So we aggregated all the financing networks in Kenya, banks through the Kenya Bankers Association, East Africa Venture Capital Private Equity Association, philanthropy, angel investors, investment banks, cooperatives, social enterprises. So we have all these aggregation of associations coming together, looking to provide financing and looking for good, what they call deal flow, good projects that are bankable. And then we created the Finternet, which is the finance trading investment network, having 5 hubs around trade, investment, Kenya at 60 to unlock FDI, finance, etc. The first one is done with all of the associations in financing. The second one is done with KEPSA Foundation. So you have a structured engagement with KEPSA and development partners. Then we have the UN Global Compact, which runs in most parts of the world. In Kenya, we have 350 companies. So we're able to, through that, really develop programs around ESG, around climate finance with private sector companies, link small SMEs to large companies onto their value chain. So we have, for example, Safaricom. Everyone talks about M-Pesa and Safaricom as Kenyan successes. How do you get SMEs who create more than 10 times the jobs of the formal sector linked to the supply chains of some of these companies? So that's what these kinds of ecosystems can do. And SMEs are incentivized because if they go through the training and they are selected, they can actually get a lot more business through Safaricom, for example. So we could do that with 50 or 500 companies. So the idea is to really link small and large businesses. We have the Kenya Healthcare Federation, which is the voice of health in KEPSA, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, 350 health sector companies. Again, try and push them towards primary healthcare because that's what we need. We can't afford to take 50 million Kenyans to secondary and tertiary education. We need to address investments at the primary healthcare level, preventive, promotive health. And now with big data technology and innovation, we're able to do that. There are some $6 billion of opportunities in Kenya. We had a McKinsey study we found. Sectors and subsectors in terms of deal sizes and margins where private sector can invest. That's helped us unlock this $200 million of pipeline. But really, you did need to do the market identification to be able to do that, to show private sector that there is wealth in primary healthcare, because otherwise the traditional view is that there's no money in primary healthcare. And then we created the Africa Venture Philanthropy Alliance, which is linked to the European and Asian alliances. The SDG Accelerator Lab. So you create this public-private umbrella around all the innovation ecosystem in Kenya. And we went with Joe Mucheru, who most of you know was a previous ICT minister, 9 years at Google, and created links with Silicon Valley partners in the agriculture sector network in Kenya. So really what the opportunity is to say that if we are trying to engage in financing with the private sector, the engagement has to be at 3 levels. It has to be at the value-based level. Why are we doing what we are doing? Because we want more impact. And we want companies to also come forward to create profit with purpose, or economic impact, economic gains with social impact, or shared value, or triple bottom line, whichever cliche you like. How do you get private capital to invest, make money, but also create the impacts we're looking for? Because if grants die out, then that's where the largest pool of money is. We've got 90 billion in the Kenyan market today, compared to 30 billion in the public sector market, compared to 750 million that 24 UN agencies are spending. So you can see we need to be a magnet to influence all flows. Moving to the next slide. Grant funding, it's a no-brainer. We've been doing it for 57 years, but there are some interesting ways of doing it as well. Diaspora funding, there are opportunities around working with philanthropists, family offices, high net worth, etc., etc. But I mean, you're all experts in grant funding, so I won't talk about this, except to say that when you do get grant funding, try and build in something in there that creates an income stream that feeds back to you once your grant dies out. Next one. pooled funding. So next slide, we created a multi-partner trust fund, as I said, in New York. You need a transparent, accountable bank account or basket of funding. So you can get on a website and track every dollar. That creates confidence between all of these partners. So pooled financing is also a way to avoid duplication of efforts and wastage. So really it's about aid effectiveness as well. And so we've created various windows around pooled financing, which I won't get into, but if you have a donor, let's say MasterCard Foundation, and they want to invest in youth, you have a window they can earmark their funding for that cost-cutting window. Next slide. We've heard of some interesting pooled funds, so GBV pooled funds that have been developed by the UN Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. So pooled funds is something we do encourage. I don't know if you know, but a lot of the richest countries in the world have made commitments under something called the Funding Compact. The Funding Compact is a percentage that they dedicate to pooled funding at the country level, which is supposed to be non-earmarked funding. But they're well below those targets that they signed up for. So there's an opportunity to work with development partners and say, look, besides putting your logo on projects at country level, you can fulfill your obligations on pooled funding and come into instruments like this. Next slide. So innovative financing, what do we mean by this? So I think Robbie alluded to, next slide, alluded to examples like a development impact bond that we've just launched in Kenya last month. And Munir has been one of our advisors. With all of these UN agencies, UNAIDS, WHO, Triggerize is an implementer, UNFPA, of course. I should mention UNFPA, given that you guys are organizing the conference today. So I should give you credit, but actually UNFPA is the main outcome funding pool. So it's actually leading on the funding side. And then we have the Children's Investment Fund. Next slide. So what does this do? This supports 300,000 girls accessing 300 public facilities in 10 counties in Kenya, in Western Kenya currently. And the idea is that you put power in the hands of the girls. So on a mobile app, they're able to select which clinic they want to go to. And once they go to the clinic, they can rate their experience. And then we pay on performance. So the idea is to also bring quality of the clinics up by creating some healthy competition and feedback from the girls. And they are treated really well because they are going to rate the facility. The idea is that initially we were working with private facilities that CIF and FCDO funded, which went extremely well. We moved now to phase 2, where we work with public and private facilities and bring in all of these UN partners. And we've launched at $12 million. We hope to expand it to $20 million next year. And then eventually the plan is to embed this within government and take away all the logos of everybody else. So really it's about systems change. Make ourselves obsolete. I mean, that's our process. So this just gives you some examples. I won't speak more, but gives you a few examples of how multi-stakeholder platforms can come together, co-create, create structured engagements with private sector, and create concrete pipelines of investments that go down to the ground. So we go beyond conceptual to concrete impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arif. Very interesting. Yeah, in particular, very interesting to look at the importance of co-creation, choosing the right partners, getting involved in a hub like the SDG partnership platform where innovations can be scaled up. And that's where you can get involved in different multi-stakeholder partnerships and hubs and get introduced to the right potential partner. And great example to see how innovative financing can, in reality, be scaled up through something like a development impact bond. So yeah, fantastic. Moving on to our second presentation, welcoming Dr. Munir to the floor, who will speak about UN Capital Development Fund Investment Advisory Initiative. So over to you.
Thank you very much. So I will, next slide, please. So let me first give a very brief intro of UN Capital Development Fund. So UNCDF is a small UN agency and usually we are not very well known. So even within the UN community, so UNCDF is a hybrid agency. And why I say it's a hybrid? Because usually within the UN system, you have humanitarian agencies, right? And we have development agencies. But so at USCDF, we are initially a development agencies, but also we have an investment mandate. So we are a financing agency as well, which is unusual to the UN, except for IFAD, it's unusual for the UN. So we are a development agency, which means that we carry out development work. So and we look at the last mile financing on the development work. So to just narrow the idea so everyone can catch it, if you have a large electricity plant somewhere for the country in Kenya, so you will find that the plant is there, but there is a lot of small communities that are not benefiting because they are not connected to the grid. They are not, they don't have the right substations and so on. So what we do, we work with municipalities, with counties to increase their capacity so they can issue, for example, municipality bond. Okay. We do also, for example, if you have a bridge, an important bridge, or a toll-free, right? Like now you have the express in Kenya, but people are not able to reach the express because their community is not connected, right? I mean, there is no road that brings this rural community to the expressway. So also we work with the community to develop that so they can have the resources and whatever to be connected to this. So this is the development part of our work. Also, we work on digital transformation, digital economy, and all that. So we help the community to become digitally enabled, and they have the right infrastructure and so on. However, in order to fulfill that development role, we realize that there's a need for a financing role as well. So if we have a community that needs certain funding to create a grid, any grid, so we need to put in place certain financial tools. And this is the specialty of UNCDF that comes into the game, that we can develop, structure, and deploy innovative financial tools. And the last word is very important, we can deploy directly with the private sector or with the public sector, which is unusual also within the UN system. So, and that's why this investment mandate bring UNCDF as a hybrid agency. Next slide, please. So I will focus today more on the SME sector, the private sector, okay, and go a little bit more micro. And I really liked what Arif, I want to just recall what Arif just made in his presentation, is that usually you have a good idea, right? You are an entrepreneur. You make a very good pitch to a NGO or a donor or whatever, and you get the first grant, right? You spend it. Then you get the second grant. Then the third grant, you won't get it, right? And so usually everything starts here, right? It starts very high risk, very small entrepreneur. And you are getting very good, especially here in Kenya and East Africa, there's a good amount of a grant, but these are not sustainable. And usually those grants, they lack also, they have some technical assistance, but not in this, because, and this is understood because the venture is still at early stage. So whatever you do as technical assistance is not enough. Now, in order to get more funding, you need to go here into impact fund, right? Impact financing or development finance, what we call. So usually you have impact fund, okay? Or you have, for example, development finance like IFC, and they will not look at you. They will not look at SMEs or venture capitals who receive the grants. You are too small. You are still too small. you are still non-bankable. And this is what we call the missing middle. This is where UNCDF will work in the value chain, will work on de-risking the missing middle, okay, creating financing venue for the missing middle so they become bankable. So they can go and pitch for the impact finance, go and pitch for the development finance, and then later on become even bankable with the commercial banks without any support from the UNDS. Next slide, please. So this slide, it shows our philosophy at UNCDF, which we call the investment continuum. Yeah. So as we just said, we have the UNDS system, the NGO system, they are very good in giving grants, which is not sustainable. You can get the grant 1, 2, but then either you have to survive on your own or to fail, to close the door and create another venture. And I saw that a lot. So they close the door and go and create another VC and then get 1, 2 grants and they close it. But this is not really workable. And then it's not what we want to see. So building on the UNDS grant, okay, UNCDF did deploy 2 main vehicles. One is on balance sheet and one is off balance sheet. Of course, this is supported by a very developed technical assistance. So we have a full team and we have full funding for technical assistance to work with the SME sector. However, we did deploy 2 funding vehicles. The first funding vehicle is on balance sheet. What does it mean on balance sheet? Which means it's from our sources as UNCDF, okay? It's called the bridge window. And in the bridge window, we can deploy either concessional loans or guarantees. And the guarantees is really, so the concessional loan is a liquidity or funding vehicle, while the guarantee is a de-risking mechanism. So we can de-risk. I'll speak about the de-risking and the funding later in the examples. Then we have another vehicle. So bridge usually is very good for very early stage, okay, for entrepreneur who received a first grant and now they are ready to prove their concept. So it's very good for a very early stage participant. Then we have another vehicle. So let's say we provided a loan for 100,000 for a under the bridge. An entrepreneur received 100,000. They proved their concept. Now they need to scale their operation, but they are still not bankable. They cannot go to banks. They cannot go to impact fund. So we have another vehicle which is called build. And build is a little more aggressive. Okay, we have a higher amount available, so we can give up to 3 million, maybe even 5 million. Okay, and we can scale the operation. We can help, and it comes also with technical assistance and so on. So we can scale the operation in very fast manner to become bankable. And the build is off balance sheet. Off balance sheet, this means it's not our own resources as UNCDF. It's a fund based in Geneva, impact fund based in Geneva, that we they raised money based on UNCDF. So UNCDF helps them to raise money. So now they have the money, the fund to be deployed, and they can deploy through transaction that UNCDF will source for them. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I will give 3 examples. I'll start with this one, which I like very much. I will give 3 examples and I will close. Maybe later on, if there's a Q&A, we can answer Q&A, okay? So the first example, which I really, one of the best example I look at usually at UNCDF. So this is in Papua New Guinea. In Papua New Guinea, there's a bank, micro bank for women-led enterprises. So it's really a woman micro bank, okay? And this bank was a startup at the beginning, and they were facing different challenges. One of the challenges is how to digitize their operation, how to automate their operation as well, and how to do their KYC. They had a very important gap in the KYC process they had. So we gave them a technical assistance in order to improve their KYC process and in order to make it automated, so to acquire the software, right? So now, but why would give them this capacity? Because now by having this automated capacity, which could be done through a fund, they can scale their operations. They reach out to any entrepreneur woman or woman-led business, right? So they can onboard on the using the phone or the website, and they can. So there's a better reach to the target, especially the Papua New Guinea. If you look at it, you cannot have a branch in every island. It's a country which is spread on different islands, right? Small, very small islands. So the next intervention we had with them is that now there's a high demand. So before they had some fund, but they had very low demand. Now, as they have digitized their operation, the demand increased significantly. And now they need more fund. So we gave them a concessional loan, and this concessional loans what's used by them to extend more loans to women-led enterprises. Later on, UN Women came to UNCDF and said, we like what you are doing, but this bank is not extending loans into this island in the northern part of Papua New Guinea. And we asked them to go, they said it's too risky. So we sat with the management and we discussed the issue. They said it's too risky, we will lose 20% if we go there. So UNCDF gave them a de-risking mechanism. We gave them a guarantee, first loss guarantee. If you go for the funds invested into that territory that UN Women choose, if you go and invest there, we will take the first 20% loss. And we took the 25% loss we took. And this enabled them to go and operate there. So here we made three kinds of intervention in one venture. So we gave them technical assistance to acquire digital economy tools. We provided funding, concessional funding. And what is the importance of the concessional funding is that we decrease the cost of funding for women entrepreneurs, right? And then we provided the de-risking mechanism so they can go to the areas which we believe are more important to us as UN system. Next slide, please. This example is in Zimbabwe. It's just recent, this example. And this one is that the Zimbabwe is lacking a gap in electricity production and distribution. UN city and UN country team in Zimbabwe, led by UNESCO, UNDP, and UN Women, they identified that alternative energy is a good solution to provide electricity for rural area and for communities. So they developed a proposal to a donor called the Joint SDG Fund. And they got a grant to be invested into the renewable energy in Zimbabwe for 10 million USD, which include also 2 million as technical assistance and 8 million to be directly injected with the investor who are willing to invest in the renewable energy. UNCDF role here was an enabler. So what we did is that we onboarded two financial institutions because we don't want to go as UNCDF, we didn't want to go. It was not in our priority here to go and work directly with the operator, service provider in Zimbabwe for different reasons. Okay. So we wanted to play with the value chain of capital availability for this. So we onboarded two financial institutions, Stanbic and Old Mutual. Okay. Stanbic will be a custodian, Old Mutual will be a fund manager. And we told them there was a competitive process and they were selected through the competitive process. So what we'll do, we established an investment vehicle in Zimbabwe, which is a fund, an open-ended fund that will be managed by Old Mutual. And why we did that? The grant is only 8 million USD. It's not even enough to finance one project in Zimbabwe in renewable energy. So it doesn't work. Putting 8 million, it will go as a sunk cost, it will be lost and will not yield a impact. So we created the fund and we said this fund is de-risked by 8 million. If it is de-risked by 8 million, this will make other participants from the private sector to participate. The end result of this was that a direct leverage of 3 times and a indirect leverage of more than 5 times. So with the 8 million we invested, there is investment from the private sector in Zimbabwe, locally, not international, reach up to initially 30 million and going up to 50 million. So we created that leverage through the de-risking mechanism we implemented. And now it's very successful. If there's time, I'll go to the third slide or I close here. I continue? Okay. Next slide. This project is under design here in Kenya. In Kenya, this is with UNDP Kenya, okay? In Kenya, there is a very good, vibrant agri sector, but unfortunately, as per FAO, more than 50%, in some areas 60% of the crops goes as waste. When you lose 60%, when a farmer is losing 60% of its work, and usually you work for 1 year, right? As a farmer, you work for 1 year to harvest once or twice. And then you lose 60%, you are losing substantial amount of income, potential income, and your disposable income become a danger because when you spend for the full year and under the pretension that you will harvest for the full year, but you are losing. So the sector will become threatened, but not only this. The country potential income as well from agri sector or GDP, contribution to GDP will go down by 60%. And also the waste is transferred to a carbon emission. So you increase the CO2 emission in Kenya. And this is a problem that needs to be treated. As per the assessment done by UNDP and FAO, one major attribution to this waste is the lack of proper storage facility. Of course, in Kenya, there's very modern storage facility in the hubs, but near the farmers, there is no proper storage facilities. And why you don't have proper storage facility? Of course, there's cost, but also there is no electricity. A storage facility needs cooling system, and the cooling system needs electricity. So the idea here that is presented is to put solar-powered small storage facility near the farmers. Of course, the problem will be to prove the concept, it works. This is number one. And second, who will invest into that? So in order to do that, because it is a proof of concept, here UNCDF created a little bit more complex intervention. So we are putting in place 3 financial instruments. Okay, the first one is concessional loan, and the concessional loan will go directly to investor or operator in the solar-powered cold storage service. And this one will be, what is the importance of this concessional loan? No collateral. So if I want to go and put a 20 metric ton storage facility, solar-powered storage facility in somewhere in Kenya, in the rural area, I will get a concessional loan with zero collateral. I don't need to put any collateral. I have to be eligible. That's it. It's 10 years and concessional interest rate. 6%, 7%, depends on the assessment. Then the concessional loan is not for the full amount. Okay, we don't want people to treat it as a grant, right? So it's for a small amount, maybe 20, 25%. Then, but we are telling the operator, we will give you one more tool, which is a de-risking mechanism. Go to the bank take a commercial loan and we guarantee 50% of your loss. And we engaged with Bank in Kenya. More than 15 banks accepted that structure. Now, this also, when we looked at the cash flow, agriculture is seasonal, right? So there will be few months where there will be no usage, or maybe farmers, they don't, at the beginning, they don't want to use it, right? Because in order for the operator to generate cash flow, farmers should harvest and put in the storage and pay for the using of the space. So maybe farmers will not be at the beginning willing to pay the cost because they don't see the arbitrage between the cost and the loss they are incurring. So we did implement two schemes here. The first scheme is a technical assistant run by UNDP, that UNDP will work with the farming community, with the cooperatives, to explain the benefit of using a storage, and that the cost is not a burden. However, it is more an investment. But also we did put for the first 5 years of operation what we call a tariff support facility. And the tariff support facility is clearly designed to support farmers so they can use the space from financial point of view till certain, so it decreases gradually till certain level where the farmer sees the benefit of using a proper storage facility, the economic benefit, not only the overall benefit. So it is self-sustainable. We are expecting to start implementing this by Q1 2024. And that's it. I will close here. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you very much. Yeah, again, great examples on how to use innovative financing to scale up. I think there's a few things I picked up on there. The fact that the UN Global Compact also offers technical support when you work with small, young innovators. So I think you'll probably have a lot of people emailing you after this to try to get involved. But thank you very much again. So how are we for time? I think what we'll do is have the last presentation and then see if we can open it up for questions at the end. Okay, so over to Teresa from the Global Innovation Fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So the challenge of speaking last is because all the speakers have said all the good things. So I sound like I'm repeating everything they've said. But for me, it's just to walk you through the considerations that a hybrid fund like the Global Innovation Funds considers when, evaluating potential innovations. So just to begin, the Global Innovation Fund, as I mentioned, is a hybrid fund where we are able to deploy both risk capital. So risk capital is debt and equity instruments or grant instruments, depending on the need of the innovator. And the reason we were founded basically is to find and fund what we call innovative solutions that have the potential to provide more cost-effective outcomes and to be able to scale for people who are living, in poverty. So we have the discretion to think about innovation very broadly, which really expands our mandate more considerably than other funds. So innovation for us is any alternative solution, any new solution than the traditionally existing approaches. So it can be a product, it can be a service, it can be a policy. That really expands the mandate and it's, widens us to be able to consider different kinds of approaches that could be innovative. We are also not really constrained geographically, but because we do think about the people who are living below, the poorest in the population. So people living below the $5 to $2 mark, then in that nature, our geographical scope tends to be mostly sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and the Pacific to an extent. And in terms of considerations, as we start thinking about how do we evaluate a potential innovation, one of the things that we look at very core to our mandate is rigorous evidence and being able to measure impacts. And I can share a little bit more about how we think about measurements later on. And the second one that, transcends between the stages of early investments to the growth or expansion stage where we do fund is the considerations for scale. So we have two teams, the risk capital team and the grants team, which I sit on, but we also call it the public sector scaling team, or public sector, scaling team, because our ambition is, as Dr. Arish said, philanthropic support cannot sustain development challenges. So we think about ultimately how do innovative solutions integrate or get adopted by government. So how do you remove those very many logos, and this solution is then taken up, owned, and expanded more by government to be able to reach everyone across the whole population. So that's very key for us. So the impact measurement, rigorous evidence, and thinking about scale. And then, of course, in terms of priority areas, we accept innovations from anywhere across the world. But increasingly so, there are emerging areas as you do investments, there are areas that become emergent as key areas for us to consider. So with that regard, we have priority areas in terms of agenda investments. So we think about how do innovations work to increase the agency for women and girls. So we've built out a portfolio over the last 5 years of really great innovations that are working across a number of social norms challenges, from early child marriages to thinking about gender-based violence, to thinking about meaningful engagement of men in childcare and maternal health outcomes. So really expansive in terms of that scope, but really with the goal to be able to increase the agency for women and girls. And then, of course, climate is becoming a key issue. I liked the last panelist who talked about how someone jumps from, trying to address sexual and reproductive health to now thinking about climate. But for us, it's how do you sometimes even address both? How do you build resilience while addressing things like sexual and reproductive health? So we do have, a dedicated climate sub-fund, but just, these priority areas are just to help us narrow down the scope and just fine tune on some of the considerations in terms of making our investment decisions. And what I tend to find at GIF is, because we have, the breadth to invest across both early stage, so really not the pilot stage, so early stage to growth and expansion. Mostly, a lot of the innovations that we do fund tend to be innovations that need to answer critical questions around, whether it's operational models, whether it's how do you integrate with government, how do you face off your own operations so that you hand over, or even from the risk capital side, how do you become commercial? So that's the breadth of some of the considerations that we give at GIF. And just to speak a little bit around, the opportunity to use some of this, what we call now, innovative instruments. And one of the ones we think about and have the discretion to use is blended finance. So we are able to think about how can we use the different instruments across the equity, across debt, and across grants to be able to help innovations be able to go through the different stages of preparing for their own solution. So around this, maybe 2 or 3 things to mention is one of the key considerations is around concessions, because we are an impact fund within that discretion, because we're an impact fund, we're able to think about how do we make sure that for us, it's returns. This solution has the potential to have bigger social impact returns, but at the same time, be able to give financial returns, especially to private sector investors. So that's one of the considerations that we do think about. And when we're applying the different instruments, whether it's debt, whether it's equity, whether it's grant, it's really depends on the need of the innovator themselves. So it's not up to the discretion of GIF as a fund to prescribe what financing instrument you require, but it just depends on the need that you have. The speakers before me have talked about, is it about de-risking? So being able to take longer, is it about thinking about adjusted risk returns? So being able to provide different instruments that are below the market rate? Or is it about providing you with the granting to be able to start those preparation stages for your own solution or for your own innovation. So that's how we think about it. And maybe just to finalize on that, 3 key considerations. 1, impact. The first question is always to the innovator, what's the problem you're solving? What's the solution? And then tying it to things like the SDGs. Are you able to demonstrate? Are you able to give clear metrics? If you don't have the metrics, do you have a clear plan on how your solution is going to be able to have that impact? So that's really key for you to be able to figure out as you consider what instrument is useful for you. So what stage of innovation are you at for you to be able to consider the particular instrument to use? The next is returns. And in terms of returns, depending on the instrument, then you need to make a case for, social impact vis-a-vis financial returns. Especially for commercial investors, both are very critical. And so you have to think about, is it in the long run when the financial returns start to show, or is it being able to offset some of the costs that, stakeholders like government would then have to allocate to be able to address some of these challenges. So think about creatively about what the returns are. It's not all returns where you're able to measure, profits versus losses. So it's to think creatively around, is it being able to offset some of the really complex developmental challenges around, for instance, I'll give a very practical example of something we're working on. We are considering an innovation that is working on age-desperate transactional sex. And what came across is if they're implementing in a place with climate challenges and the approach is impactful enough, then you're able to offset the costs that could go into mitigation because then, you've increased the ability of women to be able to adapt to climate shocks. So thinking very creatively around what the returns are for your investments. And then the last one is in terms of additionality. So this is where funds like GIF can be very additional to be able to reduce the risks or the barriers that private sector or commercial investors think about. So we have that discretion to be able to go from that preparation stage that I mentioned to tinker a little bit with your own solution, to think about how do we think about measurements. And just to mention, we have the way we think about measurements and rigor of evidence, we have what we've developed that is called a practical impact methodology. So all our investments, both from the grant side and from the risk capital side, we have to consider the impact, social impact returns to all the investments. And yeah, sometimes it's about patience. So to be able to go or work with the innovator from that stage of creating the solution to tinkering with the solution, to getting more rigorous evidence, and to also support them to bring government along. Because in the early stages, you're still figuring it out, you're still figuring the solution, you're still figuring the problem that you're trying to address. And so at what stage do you start to bring government along? Do you have some clear metrics? Do you have a plan? So we support innovators also to start thinking, yes, you have the solution. Yes, you have the operational model. How do you bring in potential scale partners? Let me stop at that. I'll probably narrow down on specific things depending on the questions that come from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Yeah, again, great examples. I think everyone has shown some concrete examples of how you scale up innovations using different innovative financing. I thought, yeah, there was a few very interesting points. Again, it seems like the Global Innovation Fund nurtures once you begin to work with the innovators. That's a large part of what you help to do, and it's finding exactly what the impact is and nurturing and growing the innovation, which I think is a fantastic way to go about it. And additionally, when making investment decisions, I think when you talk about the SDGs, you might think it's more so climate, but it's climate, it's GBV, it's poverty, it's everything combined. So I think that's there is a correlation between the health, the gender, and also the building climate resilience as well. So there is it's full circle. How are we on time? And we're okay on time. So what we'll do is 10 minutes. So okay. So we have 10 minutes to open the floor to any questions. So there is a bunch of questions. So I think first question was here in the audience. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
No, that is very destructive. Thank you so much for the information that you have given, all three of you. It's quite interesting. I love the idea of primary healthcare. I love the idea of being the middleman. I definitely love the idea of innovation is not just in tech, it's also in policy and sustainability. But one thing that came across, to what extent are all three agencies, okay, organizations involving and centering persons with disabilities, the realities of it all. Personally, I'm speaking for myself and for my organization as a woman with disability. I come to notice that in all situations, funding, especially philanthropy, with people with disabilities are viewed, especially invisible disabilities, we are viewed as additional. There's a project which has been designed by another organization, and then let's include some people with disabilities. We are not the center of it. And most cases, you always find it's in terms of scholarships and education funds, which is not what we want. We actually want to have control of our own lives, of our own projects, literally designing innovative ideas from us, centerpiece. When it comes to funding, everybody, when we bring up the idea that, yeah, we're an organization of persons with disabilities, everyone goes like, no, 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 you are not bankable. You cannot receive money. We don't trust you enough because of the idea of disability. People see the disability, not the person. So to what extent are you ensuring that we are centered in everything? Excuse, can I go on?
We'll take all the questions and then.
Thank you, our wonderful panel. That was so good of you. We thank you. My question goes to Dr. Arif Mek. Oh, sorry. I had somebody to say, Doctor, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Kindly explain or take me through why most organizations would miss out on grants, especially the diaspora grants. What mistakes do you think they make while applying for these grants? To Yazdin, you said there are roads which join like to an express way so that they work better. In this case of innovative and our case for non-profit, how do we join these dots so that we qualify for these grants being given out or like working together? And for our beautiful lady, Teresa from Global Fund, you talked about policies and products in form of fundings. Are you, I know time is not on our side. Are you able to expound further, even for just a minute? Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Madubi Robert from Tana River County, founder of an organization called the Badili Tana Initiative. It's a local organization that deals with societal affecting issues. And I'm happy that today I'm here and the presentation from you guys was amazing. And what I can say is that how I wish we had long time with them because they had a lot to unleash, but the factor of time has limited. Mine start with the Global Fund. You talked about the changing of the methodology in assessing the impact within the social change aspect. And I liked it because most of us being concentrated around if you can give empirical evidence that you can do in terms of data. And for me, I can say we we can get more information from you in what are you looking for. And I like the idea also of participatory grant making, because I can see that's the shifting of power. If you can engage the change maker throughout the process, you understand what he's doing and what are you guys willing to do, rather than you coming with a program and you want people to apply for the funds. I like that. But the idea of funding is changing from the presentation that he has had, that we are not looking at a point where we just give you funds to do programs. But again, we are looking at the whole concept of sustainability. So my question here is, as an organization, as the founder, I see myself always putting my properties or my resources so that I can help people. I have a cyber cafe that I'm really trying to also help people in the community, because we have this gap of digital illiteracy. I was in another room where young girls are brought in by Plan International, and they can express themselves very well until I admire them. But from my village, you cannot get a 15-year-old girl who can express and tell us what she's doing or what is inspiring her to be where she want to be. So my question goes to the three organizations. If I want to expand this, because I've tried also looking for support to get maybe refurbished computers to do a computer hub, so that I can get in children and also youth that can also learn digital knowledge, digital skills, so that they can tap in from the digital markets. How are you helping in that aspect of maybe supporting an organization that wants to do a computer hub to help the community? Because I've tried that, and the organization that was offering me refurbished computers told me, if you can give us statements that you can transport the goods from America to Kenya, then we can give you the refurbished. But I don't have that funds because it's over around 300,000. So how are you supporting that? Also, you talk about supporting counties and everything. We have a situation where there are two villages separated by the River Tana, and there is no bridge. We just use local canoes. And the other side is the farming area, this side is the living area. And whenever harvest has been done, there is one road that connects those two villages around 20 kilometers. So products are taken 20 kilometers from the shamba to reach a village that is just disconnected with a river that is not even maybe 20 meters long. So how again are you coming in to maybe do research in the counties? I'm talking in the issue of Tana River, to also see how you can develop that side, because the human aspect also is being affected by it. And the last thing is I wish to connect with you guys, and I'm willing to share the innovations idea we have and the stories that we have, and how I wish he said that he will share the the emails and phone numbers so that you can see if we can engage me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My sister, you want to jump me now? Okay, my question is to the Global Innovative Fund and UNCDF. So to the Global Fund, you spoke about, the impact return and additionality and also evidence. So what I want to know is that, do you only provide funding, or is there any training that you also provide for youth-led or innovators without a background, or without, those who haven't had luck with securing fundings for the past 5 years to move from funding to actually financing themselves? Because, you know, we're speaking about sustainability as my gentle brother there spoke. So how do you provide training instead of just funding only, or are you looking into providing training, you know, for future purposes? Because Africa needs to aid itself. So how are you going to do that, from funding to financing themselves, and also to the UN and CDF? You know, I've seen that you are working with mostly underdeveloped countries. How are you looking into working with youth groups that are working with those underdeveloped country, you know, working within those underdeveloped countries? Like, for instance, I'm going to speak for myself, like my gentle sister, they at the organization that I work with, AfriEN, you know, we work in the Eastern and the Southern African region, and most of those countries, you know, not all of them, but most of them are underdeveloped. So how are you planning to engage such organizations that have a broader net to cast into, you know, other countries when it comes to SRHR or the SDGs? Let me just say the SDGs that are working with all the 17 SDGs. How are you planning to do that? Thank you. I think I kept it short and simple like myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have two more questions and we'll just keep them brief. And then what we will do is we will give the panelists maybe 3 minutes each to answer the questions, and perhaps a little bit of time after the session as well if somebody wants to engage with them. So
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Paul Masese from Center for Enhancing Democracy and Good Governance. It's a Kenyan organization working mostly in the Rift Valley region of Kenya. I think, I don't know if it's a question or a comment. It's directed at Alif. First, thank you for the emphasis you laid on, you know, private sector engagement. Indeed, for most of us, what we call round tables don't go beyond CSR, and often they've not delivered any substantive results in terms of financing. Now, what you described appeared to me and to be, for lack of a better word, exclusive. I see the engagement as happening between UN and the big boys in the private sector in Kenya. They're the case of Kenya Private Sector Alliance and the example you gave in healthcare financing. I think whatever ends up being done is mostly beneficial to the corporates, and my view, with very little benefits accruing to communities. We have foundations. Take the example, Equity Bank and the Wings to Fly program. Yes, we will say in the end, there are households that benefit, whose children benefit from the grants. But there are so many issues accompanying, accountability issues accompanying the processes in terms of what roles community level force stakeholders play. So my request to you is that you try and step down the engagements. You being the UN, I think you occupy a strategic position where you can enable county level actors, like in the CSO sector, to start engaging. I have a feeling that in the end, profit supersedes the social impact that you so well emphasized. Thank you.
thank you. We have one more question here.
Thank you to our panelists for the discussion. You've opened my mind personally, especially when you talked about the things that you look at in grant, when you look at for those of us who are applying. But I realized you emphasize more on organizations to think broad, to move from just applying for grants, but maybe to invest in those grants so that they can get financial returns. But then again, for us, when you look at most of our organizations are not for profit. And I know you've talked about hospitals and such things, but maybe like when you look at the organization I work for, it's a nonprofit organization, Kenya Works. Okay, we don't deal with hospital per se, but we deal with other programs like trainings and community forums, donating of sanitary towels, So you find when you do such activities, it is you do it to help others, and it is difficult to get that financial return. So my question is, what advice would you give us, a nonprofit organization, so that we can move from grant, because like you said, we cannot get grant all the time, but we can move from this and start gaining financial returns, but still align to our mission and vision. And still we don't move away from our key goal and start making money instead of helping people. So yes.
Thank you very much. So yes, just in essence of time, what we will do is there's a lot of questions to get through, but we will give each of the panelists 3 minutes to answer the questions, and we'll allow time, I guess, for networking. Are you guys approachable after this if people have more questions? Yeah. Okay. Right. Super. So Teresa, I will let you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the excellent questions. And for me, my answer is both simple, but can address a lot of the issues that came up around how do we think about policy or products? How do we think about disability? How do we think about what you said in terms of how does someone move from grant funding to be able to commercialize? So I mentioned one of the key things, and the first thing we look at is how is your solution differentiated? So in that aspect, it's what problem are you addressing? What solution are you proposing? And how is that solution different? We're talking about innovation. It has to be different than standard practice. And if you're able to define that, then you know the vision of what you want to achieve. You know the impact you want to achieve, and you know the vision of what you want to achieve. And a lot of the complex developmental challenges that we're addressing, especially as nonprofits, are basically because of scarcity of resources and government failures. So what you're trying to provide is almost like a solution that can then, if government has more resources, they can probably provide that solution. And I like what Arif said, it's about phasing you out. Being very bluntly honest, especially for nonprofits. Nonprofits are not supposed to be endlessly providing solutions. If countries are supposed to move from lower middle income to upper middle income countries, nonprofits would be phased out because the problems become less. So my challenge to you is, what solution are you proposing? Because I'm not going to prescribe the solution to you. And how is it differentiated? If you're telling me you're working on sexual and reproductive health, and specifically around provision of pads, there's so many organizations that provide pads. Why should I fund you and leave the other organization? You're providing training, but if I go look at the training you're providing, I can probably find the same curriculum online. So what's differentiated about your own curriculum? So that's the challenge right there, for you to be able to define what solution are you providing? What problem are you addressing? Because you also can't address 15 problems, but it also depends on the type of organization that you are. You know, if you're a CBO, then there's a lot of challenges around being able to respond and being accessible to the local communities. And that's a big challenge with a lot of grassroots organizations. But if you have one specific goal, one mission and one vision, then you're able to focus. And even if there's an expanded mandate, you're able to come back to your North Star of what is your vision for success, and being the things you cannot address, seeing who else within your ecosystem can address that. So knowing what type of organization you are, knowing what problem you're trying to provide, and being able to articulate the solution that you're providing, then all these other things around how does impact happen, what are the channels of impact, what are the measurements, what's the right evidence, what's the right impact, naturally comes in. And those are the things that if you work with us, we're able to help you define it. And for us, we don't provide technical assistance. What you want to do also comes from you, because you know where you are on your journey. You can be able to say, I have a model, it's been proven out, I have a 10-year plan, I need funding for the first 5 years, that is grants. But at the 5-year mark, I know there's a policy that it's coming out. Maybe the UN is going to provide some funding, maybe the World Bank will provide some funding, and there's an opportunity for me to provide this solution to the World Bank, which offsets my costs. So you become the technical assistant to organizations like the World Bank, because you have a very unique solution that addresses the same SDG issues that they're addressing. And I think the last thing in terms of that is also, in my past life, I was a resource mobilizer. I used to get very frustrated sending thousands and thousands of applications to funders that I saw were aligned, and I couldn't understand, why am I getting rejected? The first thing for any organization is to do your homework on what type of funder this organization is, or what this funder is, or what that investor does. Look at criteria. Do your homework, speak. If I come to this forum and you think I'm a right funder, let's have 1 or 2 conversations before you even take time to put in an application. We should not waste the time of innovators. It's very valuable. Probably 5 of you cannot be funded by all the 3 agencies. Maybe only one of us is the right fit. So do your homework, understand the criteria, understand what we're looking for, and understand if we're the right funder for you. I usually tell some innovators, I don't think you're the right person for you, because we'll constrain you, because as we want outcomes and measurements and rigor, and we're thinking about things like impact evaluations and randomized control trials, those are some of the criteria. So we need certain specific organizations that we can help de-risk, that maybe have more differentiated solutions. But there's a correct funder for you out there. So it's a little bit about doing your homework, understanding the organization you are, understanding the right funder for you, understanding what your the problem you're trying to solve, understanding the solution and how it's differentiated. Thank you.
Thanks very much. No, I agree. I think these were really amazing questions. Really amazing questions. Thank you so much. Just to quickly pick on some of them, and we probably might, if we miss any, you can tell us. I think there was one very straightforward question that said, how can we improve our chances of getting grants, and how come we're not getting grants? And I think it's similar to what she mentioned. And I think some of the key things that you really need to be articulating and be convinced of is impact. Ultimately, everything else is hot air until impact happens. Everything else is just a means to an end. So, impact, and how do you measure impact? There are clear standards now globally and locally on how SDG impact can be. And the SDGs were great because they gave us a tool to measure impact across private sector, philanthropy, UN, because now we had a common thing. Before, we used to have corporates doing these wonderful reports on their CSR, and you really didn't understand the impact because you didn't have a common measurement. Now you have a common measurement. So that's very important. The second one, of course, is this whole issue of sustainability. That if you get a grant, the grantor wants to know, as Munir said, after 1 or 2 grants, how are you going to sustain what you do? So what is your long-term financial plan to sustain it, sustain your HR, sustain the quality of what you do, the impact, etc. So thinking beyond the grant. The third thing is really about, as she said, innovation. What distinguishes you from 50 other applications that are doing similar stuff? Because we always see like hundreds of applications, and many of them are very similar. Youth in ICT, women in agriculture, the standard themes come across. Even across UN agencies, I see a lot of agencies working on some common themes, and now we're doing joint programs so they can all come together. And I think one very important one that often gets forgotten beyond innovation and all of that is integrity and credibility. Make sure that you have integrity, credibility, you associate with people that are of high moral standing. Don't be putting in grant applications and then be smoking pot on a photograph on Facebook. Make sure that your messaging is clear across the board, and you associate yourself with the right people, and be honest about what you want to do. Secondly, I just say that in terms of this question of NGOs and financial returns, and if you're a non-profit and you're not looking at profits, then how are you going to sustain yourself beyond the grant? I think that was the question. And I think that there are models out there, and I myself running a large foundation, Aga Foundation, for 14 years. What I did was, I used to go to barazas on the ground every month, sit with the farmers, talk to village elders, have mud under our fingernails. And we would preach the gospel of self-reliance, making sure the community is village-led savings banking and things that take you off reliance. And then I'd come back to office and write an email asking for core costs from Geneva. So I felt a bit of a hypocrite. I'm preaching something and then I'm doing the other thing. So what I did was I looked at our property portfolio that we managed as a foundation. We had many properties that were disused, not fully optimized. I took one property in General Mafenge, and created a build, operate, transfer, which was take a private sector company to invest $4 million in building a 4-story property called the Courtyard. And then I brought in, very credible tenants like General Electric Africa head office, Actis, Diamond Trust VIP banking. And all of a sudden, I have a model that after 30 years, when the private investor goes, the appreciation on the property, which will probably be $40 million, will come back to the foundation, but we'll have 90 years of income stream coming to sustain the foundation. We did the same with KCDF, Kenya's largest community foundation, which we helped to co-create, and donated a property to their endowment, and they've now built a high rise and they'll get 90 years of income back to their property. So can you monetize other types of assets around you? And my friend, the Secretary General of Kenya Red Cross, the previous one, he inherited the most bankrupt Red Cross unit in the world. And what he did was, just like me, he created a private sector arm, created a private sector company, started building hotels like the Boma in South Sea. He started building conference centers. He bought ambulances and provided ambulance services to counties for a price, for a return. And by the time he left, it was the richest Kenya Red Cross unit in the world, literally. So the idea is that nothing stops you from creating a for-profit arm, which would be a separate entity with explicit statutes that will cross-subsidize the foundation. So there are ways to do that. There are a lot of NGOs that often can't afford an accountant, and there isn't much money to keep your books and continue your core costs, because most donors will give you activities, but they won't fund your core costs. So you lose your talent. But sometimes, the church might have given you 5 acres of land that you're sitting on. How do you monetize that? There are ways to monetize that. So just think beyond. And we had seaweed farmers in Zanzibar who were giving 10% back to the early childhood center in the community because they were parents of children who were being trained. So there are private sector models, if we can be a bit more creative, that can sustain what you do beyond grants. And finally, I'll just say a quick one. I think Tana River, 2 points. One was building a bridge across the river. Now, these are the types of context-specific projects that need to be driven in public-private partnerships at the county level. So how do we create a multi-stakeholder forum at the county level with private sector, civil society that can engage the county assembly? How do you get champions in the county assembly and create some kind of a public-private model and make sure it's in the CIDP and make sure there are opportunities? Now we're working with the Commission for Revenue Allocation, and there's an initiative for doing credit ratings, global credit ratings for counties. And about 5 counties are already credit rated because they can't borrow without going through Treasury if you want a sovereign guarantee, which is off the table. But now these counties can actually borrow directly from international markets because they have credit rating. So there are ways to do it, but it has to start from Tana River. It has to start with a multi-stakeholder lobby engaging with the assembly. And when it comes to computers and the like, I used to run a computer training school in Canada. What we would do is, look at organizations like TechSoup, look at organizations like Microsoft. We have all the top IT companies sitting in Nairobi, so we're lucky. There's a Generation Unlimited initiative that's global, where President Kenyatta used to be the champion, and now, of course, the current president. There are opportunities there where you can engage with IT companies who are actually looking for partners on the ground and turn your cafes also into employment centers for youth and women, because there are online jobs that one can do, which are very simple, even for people out of school who can earn a huge amount of money. And look at the example of Sama Source on Google, who would bring those types of jobs to Kenya for the types of call centers that you can do. So there's a fair amount of opportunities in much of this. Thank you.
Excellent. I believe you replied almost to every question. I just want to comment on 2 issues I believe were not addressed. The first one is regarding, for example, as a handicap, you're right, and how to reach out to connect or to benefit from service financing from UNCDF. So first of all, as UNCDF, we, as mentioned, Arif and my colleague here as well, impact is really important. and additionality is very important when we assess any transaction. And when we go to group like handicap and so on, I believe the impact is high. So chances of getting approved when you have such impact is very high. So they are not left behind. And this aligns with UNCT in Kenya, no one is left behind. So, but what you need is to apply, right? This year, 2023, UNCDF did, I mean, the only way to connect with UNCDF is through when we do a publication. So we publish, we are deploying fund, and this is done on our website and UNDP website and also on social media. So this year we did more than 8 call for expression of interest. We received a huge number, but the eligibility was very low because there's eligibility questions, right? You need to answer. And one of the eligibility if you have a viable business plan. And this is a very critical. What I noticed that more than 90% of the application we received did not have a business plan. And we don't expect a business plan done by E&Y or PwC and so on. No, we want just one paper, one piece of paper explaining the idea, how you will generate your cash flow, how you will spend your cash flow. This is all what we require. And what I noticed that 90% were rejected by the system because this was not submitted. Okay, so you need to build, and this is important role you can, as associations or non-profit organization that you can play is how to build those business plans, right? And then to monitor whenever there's a call for proposal, you can help those to apply. So on the last call for proposal we did in Kenya was on this project, the solar called, the power called storage facility. What I noticed is that a lot of proposals were not eligible at all because we required a business plan, but also required also technical specification because what we want is to measure the carbon emission reduction, right, by using the solar panels. Only there was, I believe, 7% exactly the eligible application we received, and those 70%, all the application were facilitated by a association. Okay, so this association will not get any benefit, but they help those entrepreneurs to do the right model and submit it into the UI. And the UI is not really complex. Huh? It's a few questions you need to answer and put the attachment. And if you can deliver, you should be able to do the attachment, right? So, and this is an important role for all associations, NGOs, and so on, to build capacity on it. I don't know if I missed something.
Sorry, I'm going to take like sort of a few seconds to just mention. I think there's a question at the back that I would like to also mention. So when we spoke about creating some of these private sector partnerships and platforms like Fintrinet, SNet, etc., the idea was to engage with private sector associations. So there is no vested interest of one company in our partnership. It's an umbrella body like KEPSA or CAM or Chamber of Commerce, etc. But the programs that one would do together are programs that benefit right down to the ground. That's the whole idea of impact. So the intention is to make sure that whatever you do is actually filtering down. So let me give you an example. If, for example, we're working with the UN Global Compact, which is 350 companies in Kenya alone, and what they do is they subscribe to the 10 UN principles as private sector companies, and they join as a membership, and anyone can join. If you subscribe, you can join. I chair the program committee, for example. And what that does is that it actually has over 300,000 SMEs from the ground who are linked to the larger companies. One example is we have a program where we take Safaricom and we link Safaricom to SMEs who can get onto their supply chains. So SMEs who are really looking for market and business are linked to Safaricom supply chains after some training that we provide. The moment they're linked to Safaricom, they're already getting that business straight away, so they can grow very quickly. Safaricom's gets already a curated line of SMEs, so for them it's great because they can find good SMEs out there. So the idea is well thought through, that ultimately it's about impact. It's not about large corporates, and it's not elitist at all, believe me, because I come from the civil society sector. On disabilities and other issues, I just want to say that oftentimes you say, what are you doing about this, or what are you doing in this and doing that? And one experience I can give you after 4 decades in the sector is to say time is our chief capital. And rather than wait for others to do it, you design your own program, get a few champions, and before you know it, it will snowball. I can guarantee you that there's so many examples like those. So if you want to create a disability impact bond, you want to create a program like that, there are many partners out there who will come and join you. You'll become like a magnet. But really take the first step and be the change that you're trying to propose to others. Thank you.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. I think that just about covers it. I want to say a special thank you again to the panelists. I'd say I hope your questions were answered, but once again, Arif Neki from the SDG Partnership Platform, Dr. Munir Ezzedine from the UN Capital Development Fund, and Teresa Bosabari from Global Innovation Fund. Is that where you guys can be found in your respective organizations? Thank you for the questions. Thank you for joining and participating. It was a very fruitful event. So I think it's time for some lunch. You want a photo? That's if they agree. I'm sure they'll be willing. All right. Thank you very much.